Hello, IS 145. We are coming up on midterms, but I did want to go over what this week looks like and also a little bit about what's to come. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've tried to get as much as I could graded. That way you kind of knew where you stood. Um, This assessment here, I ended up changing the date. It originally said that it was going to be due October 5th, but this is kind of like your midterm. It just doesn't say that. It is an assessment. It is over chapters 1 through 3, which we have covered already between the PowerPoints that I've shown, the things that I went over, the questions that you all have answered, and also the exercises that you have done. So with that being said, just to kind of give you a brief overview, this is going to be 60 questions from chapters 1, 2, and 3. You'll have an hour to complete, and you do only get one attempt. How to study for this, I would say definitely look at your quiz questions that you've already answered for chapters 1, 2, and 3, and also look at the book, obviously, but also take a look at your questions that you have answered throughout the weeks as well. So that would be how to prepare for that. That is worth 120 points. Make sure that you also this week kind of read through chapter 4. You will have questions that don't apply to the midterm. This will be due October 5th. Now, I'm not going to be recording on Thursday, which means that I will not be present for a lecture or a Zoom meeting on Tuesday like I normally am. So I may try to pop that in the announcements too, just so that anybody that typically shows up, that you're aware that I will not be doing a Zoom Tuesday. So this is going to be your Tuesday class, and I intend to go ahead and go through some concepts from chapter 4, and we'll continue that discussion next week after you have your fall break. So I will be back to recording on Monday, sorry, not Monday. I will be back to recording on Sundays like I normally do for Tuesday, and then for Thursday's class, I typically record on Tuesday. So if you show up to class, you're going to show up the same time that you always do, Tuesdays and Thursdays. But for my people who Zoom with me, I will be available next Tuesday, October 7th. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm also going to break away and give you kind of some examples as we go through here. But the big thing is adding style to our pages. So for now, we've done some image adding. We've done like the skeleton of the web page itself, where you're adding the different size headings, you're adding paragraphs, you're adding lists and description lists, and even embedding maps. But there's still things left to learn as far as making your websites a little more, I would say, formatted, having a little more style, maybe that's color or just changing the size of things. And so we will be working with CSS, which is a different language than HTML, but they go hand in hand. So your CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And it is going to be a separate file that we are going to make and then also connect to that HTML file so that then you can start seeing the changes in the design or the look of your website. So we'll talk about what different CSS rules there are, the syntax of writing that language, and then breaking down what a selector, the property, and the value are of that particular language. We'll also create styles that use text and color properties. It's definitely, I think, it becomes more interesting, I think, whenever you start adding things and they're more visually pleasing. We'll also look at the CSS box model and how you can apply that to the margins, padding, and the borders, and creating that style sheet separately and linking it into the HTML page, which I hope to break away and show you in this particular video. We'll create responsive images. We'll learn how to use the float and clear properties, style ID, and class attributes. We'll use span elements and then also add comments to those sheets and validate a CSS file as well. Creating a well-designed website that captures your audience's attention is very important in obtaining and attracting new customers. So web developers use different font styles, font colors, the white space, and then background colors or images to increase that visual appeal. CSS is that language that's designed to format the document for an HTML file, for HTML, and in this case, HTML5. So that is going to determine the formatting for the web page. So I'm going to be using the fitness web page that you all did to show you kind of how this all works together. But basically, you're going to do well, you might be building on another project that you've done, but the roadmap here is that we're going to create that CSS file, still using Visual Studio Code. The file extension for that would be .css. You're used to seeing the .html, but this time it'll be .css. But you have to make sure that you have the link to the CSS file within your HTML page. And I'll show you where to put that as well. You have to create the style rules on the CSS file. Adding comments would be a necessary thing as well, especially as your CSS file gets more detailed. And then, of course, you want to validate to check yourself for errors. I don't know that everybody does that for the HTML files, but definitely look at that rubric whenever you guys are doing your assignments, because that is part of it. Because if there are any issues that arise, I'm putting your HTML file in that validator that you could very well do as well. And it's going to give me the errors that you have. So make sure that you validate whenever you are creating these files. So the style rule is going to define the appearance of an element on a web page. Style sheet is the set of CSS style rules. It does separate the styling side of things from the content, because then it could give the flexibility to redesign or rebrand a website if for some reason the colors change, or you're just wanting to make some overall changes. And it is important, especially if you have a larger website, to not intertwine all of those things, because there are ways to style text within HTML, but then your document, your web page gets very busy and it's hard to separate. But when you can start naming those elements and sticking to a set style, it's much easier to navigate and then make changes if you needed to. And you'll see what I'm saying whenever we break apart and learn how to do some of these things. So this is an inline style. So if you were to keep your styling within the HTML document, you can see that it could get very busy very quick, because you have your H1, your heading tag started there. But then the next part is you have to put style and then an equals, and then you put in your style rule, which is within quotations. And then you have the text that it applies to. So if you're wanting to add the navy color font to special note, this is what it would look like. And then of course you would still have your closing H1 tag. And you could do this, and people do, but when you don't separate it, it becomes very busy very quickly. Especially if you're going to change the font for every single title or every text that you have. And if you have an embedded style sheet, so this is again still on the HTML document, this would be an internal type of style sheet where the style rule that we are actually going to put on the CSS file is within the document, the HTML document itself. So you'll see that you've got your familiar head tag with your title tags, and then embedded within your heading section, you've got a style rule that applies to the body, meaning that your background color of your page in this case would be green. Again, you could do it this way, but this would be considered embedded within the HTML document. Again, could get very busy very quickly. And then as far as an external style sheet, that would be that separate CSS file that contains all of the styles that could be applied to more than just one page in your website. Also, this is called a linked style sheet. So we have to have this text with the .css extension, and we have to link it within the HTML document itself, within the head section of the web page. And I'll show you how to do that. It does provide flexibility to quickly change the different styles within your page. So let's say that you're wanting to change the background color. You can do that on that CSS file, save everything. And as long as you have the link in the HTML document, it's going to update the color as you've changed it. And this can apply to any other elements as well. So if you have multiple H1 tags, and you're formatting those a particular way, whether it be that they're in the center of the page, so you have text -align center. It could be that you are wanting to format your paragraph elements or your lists in a certain way, or even your images. You can make it to where all of your images have a border around them. And so you only have to do that once. You don't have to type the code out multiple times for the different images that you have. You can easily just do an image style rule set and then put what you want those to look like and assign different attributes to keep consistency. Style sheets are said to cascade because each type of style has a specified level of precedence or priority in the relationship to the others. CS properties can be inherited from a parent element through a principle called inheritance. If a selector has more than one CSS rule, it determines which CSS rule to apply. So here's the basics here. You've got a CSS rule that applies to the body. The body is considered your selector. So if you put the P tag there, your paragraph would be the selector. And then the declaration is what it is that you are wanting to add in this style set for your set of rules. And it can be more than one. It doesn't have to just be the one. Every time you add something, you would, after that semicolon in this example, you would press enter and you would keep everything between those curly braces. You'll notice that they're not angle brackets in this case. You've got an opening curly brace and you've got an ending. And so all of your declarations for the body as it applies to that would go there. Selector, that's the part of the statement that it identifies what to style, in this case, the body. So you can style the body, the header, the navigation area, the main or the footer. It may also be the value of an ID or class attribute. Declaration is going to define the exact formatting of that style. So that's going to have a property and a value. So in this case, in this part of your declaration, your property would be background dash color, green would be your value. And then notice how you've got the colon between your property and your value, and then you also have a semicolon after the value. That is how you do the declaration. So in order to make it work, just be aware that you have to have it just like that. Now you'll notice that because we've got two words also on our property, that we've got a dash. So we've got background dash color. That dash is important as well, because you're going to have other things that are just like that, such as text dash align. That's another example. And then your value would be whether it's left, right, center, or whatever it is that you decide to put there for the value that works. For each property, the declaration is going to include that value that's going to identify the particular property value to apply. Some ideas here for what you can do with the style. We can change the color, background color. We can do text indent, border width, and font style. Those are just some examples. There's many others that you could use. So I kind of broke this down previously, but you can kind of see here all of the elements that you have to have as far as the basics go. If you don't have any declaration, then you're not going to see any changes. So it doesn't have to be that you change the entire background color. Maybe it's just the text that you want to change or the images that you want to format. That would be depending on what you're looking for as far as design goes. You can use CSS styles to format web page text in a variety of ways. You can also change font sizes using lots of different units. You could use pixels, points. You could even specify by keyword or percentage. So as far as the units that you can use, they're listed here in this table. For instance, you could specify font size by pixels, which is px, and that is going to depend on your screen's resolution as to what that looks like. Or you could do points. You could even just use it by keyword. So you could do font dash size and then just put large and then do a semicolon. And that would just be relative to what the browser that you're viewing in, what that default font size is. Some size options are going to be limited. So if you want to get more specific, you might use some of those other units of measurement as far as size of fonts. HTML does use color names or codes to designate color values. Of course, you could just put in the color. But if you want to get specific, you can actually look at HTML color codes or look up hexadecimal code online, and then you can find specific values that contain a 6-digit number code that correspond to whatever RGB colors, color combos that you're looking for. And so that might be like a hashtag with a set of numbers or even letter combo. It depends on what color you choose as to what that number would be. So in this case, you've got background dash color as the hashtag 808080. That's going to give you a gray type of color. But again, you can look this up to find those exact colors, but you can certainly just type in, background dash color and then do blue semicolon, and that would work too. Here are some color values you can see, because you can also use the RGB method of naming your colors, and that works too. So what you can see here is that if you wanted to do a black background, for instance, you could do background dash color and then do the hashtag with the 6 zeros and semicolon, or you could do background dash color colon RGB with the 000 in parentheses with a semicolon, or even look at the hue, saturation, and lightness and specify it that way. This gives you just kind of a table of some primary colors here for you to use if you so choose. So lots of different ways to get this accomplished. HTML elements are positioned on the web page as a block or as an inline content. So a block element is going to appear as a block because it starts and ends with a new line, such as the main element on a paragraph element. You've got inline elements that are displayed without line breaks, so they flow within the same line. And then your inline content always appears within the block elements. Each block element, such as a header, the navigation, the main, and the footer element, is displayed in a browser as a box with content. The CSS box model describes the content boxes on a web page. So you can specify some of these things, like if you want your content to fall within a set margin between where your content begins and the top of the screen. You can also specify the padding between certain elements, like you may have, like in this picture, you've got the content and the padding that is between that content and the border. That can be specified in the CSS file as well. So you would do padding and then kind of test out how much you're wanting and how that looks, and kind of figure out what is the best way to try to convey what you're trying to go for. Each content box can have margins, borders, and padding. Margin is going to give that white space between the elements. The border is going to separate the padding and the margin, and the padding is that passive white space between the content and the border of a block element. So when you're creating that external style sheet, it is used to create the rules that apply to more than one web page in a website. So some of these websites that we've created, like the fitness one, for example, you've got multiple pages in addition to your home page or your index page. And we can change our CSS file to where it applies to the entire website. So we don't have to go in each page's code and add all of this styling. We're going to save time to build that one CSS file that links to all of those pages, if we're wanting to convey that consistent theme or design that we're working on for our website. So this is the link that you're going to need to link your specific file to the CSS file. That way you can actually see those changes. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like on Visual Studio Code and how to get it to run. So I'll be doing that. So the first thing that I'm doing is I am opening up my index file. And where we're going to end up putting this link to our CSS file will be in our head tags. I'm going to make some space here for the line of code that I'm going to enter that's going to connect to our CSS file. But we need to create that CSS file first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a new text file, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth to kind of show you some things I'm thinking about. So if I wanted to, for instance, change the background of our page to start with, I am going to, on my CSS file, I'm going to go ahead and name the element that I'm wanting to apply this to. So I'm going to type body, and I'm going to do an opening curly brace, and you'll see that two appear. If I press enter, the closing one automatically goes below, and then this leaves me some space to put my property and my value. So the first thing, like I said, is I'm going to change the background color. So I'm going to go ahead and put background dash color colon. And then, like I said, you have a lot of options here as how you want to name your colors. If you want to get specific, you can do the hexadecimal code and do it that way. Or you can just type in the color name. As long as it is a typical color that you can just name here, you can just do that. Then just make sure you add your semicolon. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to save this file. The location of where I save this to is important. So I am editing my fitness page. So I'm going to go into my fitness folder, and I do have a folder for CSS. This is where that style sheet is going to go. So I'm going to double click the CSS folder, and I'm going to name this styles. And then the extension here, it says to save as type is .css. So as long as you see that as far as your file type, you're good. So I'm going to save it. Now, if we try to run this without having the link to this particular file, it will not work. So if I run it, you're not going to see any changes. This is obviously not a black background. So what we have to do in our HTML file is put a link that references to that particular file. So the way to start this, if you look at specifically slide, not sure which number this is without closing out of it, 28. You need this setup right here. So we've got link rel equals style sheet in parentheses, href equals, and in this case, we are going to have the same exact setup here. So like this is pointing to what folder that the styles sheet is. And then also the exact file name, because I named it styles and then .css, all in quotations with a closing angle bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and put this between the head tags, the link rel. We name this style sheet and then point it to our CSS folder. And then specifically styles.css, and then make sure you do your closing angle bracket. So, oh, when I spelled style sheet wrong. I'm going to save this file. So I did Control S, so you may not have seen me save it, but make sure you save it. Then if we try to run it, oh great, we have a black background. The only problem is our text is black, and so we can't see anything. That's normal. If I were to change this to any other color, it would work. So if I do that, I'll go back to my styles sheet here, and I'm going to, you'll see that you actually have an option to pick a color this way too. So if I change it to more of a blue color, of course, I'm going to have to save this file, but I should be able to go back to my index file, refresh it, and then now we can see everything. I'm just going to keep it this way for sake of simplicity here. So obviously we've got a few different things going on here. We've got a heading 1 that we could specify as a different color. We could maybe even center it. So let's go ahead and simulate that as well. So I'm going to minimize this for now, go back to my style sheet. And if I'm wanting to change specifically my H1, so I'm going to name that, do my opening curly bracket, press enter, and then put my elements here. So if I want it to be a different color, I can do color. And if I want it to be white, I can do that. If I want to center it on the page, I can do text dash align. If I want to change the font style, there's a whole lot of options. I think I can pick fantasy. And then I'm going to save this file again. Go back to see what changes. There you go. You've got those elements have been changed just for the heading. So if I wanted to change the paragraph side of things, I would need to do the same thing for the paragraph element. So I would need to add to my style sheet. Maybe we'll keep the color black, but maybe we want to do a different font. I'll just pick a different one. Maybe that needs to be centered as well. And maybe it also needs to be white to stand out a little more. So that kind of shows you how to manipulate some of these elements. But if we wanted to take a look at, let's say, our about page, because I believe that was another page within this particular folder for me. So if I look at my about file, it looks here like I have some images, and you guys might have more here because you completed the assignment. So I can also change some of these things. So let's go ahead and look at what happens if we try to run this. You'll notice that nothing has changed. And that's because we don't have that link in this particular file. So I need to go to my index file and I need to copy this line of code in order for our changes to apply to this page. So again, putting this between the head tags. Now, if we try to run it, it's going to apply what we did for the other page as well. We haven't gotten to the description list or the bulleted lists. But you can see that some of the same elements have been changed as well because we use that style sheet. So if I wanted to edit the images, I would use that image selector. So in your styles section, type image. And some of the things that you can specify is let me see here, size. Actually, I think it's width. We'll do width. And I'm going to use pixels. And then I'm going to use a border. You can actually, there's options here too, but I'm going to choose solid and border dash color. We'll do white. So if I run this, the pictures are a little compressed that way. We could edit the height or feel like the images need to be centered too. So let's change this. Oh, that's worse. I need to go further out. And I may need to take this part off. There we go, that's a little better. It still didn't center it, so I would need to um I don't know why I just typed text dash align. And try align dash items. See if that works. Oh, I don't know what I'm thinking. It's float. Totally forgot. So this should be float. Might not actually be center though. How you specify that? Float. If it's middle, or if we can just do. Well, that's gonna cause an issue for going over the text. So let's just take this off for now. As you can see, a lot of this is trial and error. And sometimes you have to look things up because you forget how to specify them, and that is totally normal. But there is a way to center them. I just have to get my mind right. So that kind of gives you at least a little bit of an idea about how you can use this style sheet to start changing the way that things look. And the fact that it can apply to all of your pages gives you that level of consistency and a reduction of the amount of lines that you would have to type if you try to do this internally within your HTML files. You already got enough going on as it is. So I'm going to stop there, and then we'll pick back up on, let's see, it would be, I think I said Tuesday, October 7th. If you have any questions between now and then, just let me know.